Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our Monday Night Football preview for tonight's two-game slate. Gonna go through everything you guys need to know, whether it's for Draftkings, DFS, or over there on the prop side of things with our Underdog and Prize Picks props to get you ready for both matchups tonight. So on the DFS side, gonna focus on some ownership, some strategy for this two-game slate, and then on the prop side of things, as I mentioned, some prop value on Underdog and Prize Picks that I've already gotten some exposure to that you might want to consider adding to a slipper to yourself. So a lot to talk about. Let's not waste any time at all. Started off with, first off, a look at the two-game DFS slate. For the DFS side, we're going to more so focus on the ownership angle and strategy than player pool notes. So if you want the player pool, you want to see who I'm playing tonight, the Patreon's going to be the best place for that. But more so here, going to give you some of the pros and cons to taking one team, one player, etc., etc. So in terms of the main slate, some of the main chalk out here for Monday Night Football, it's worth noting that that second game between the Lions and the Seahawks is going to be where a majority of your ownership is. Part of that is due to the high game total there. It's over a 46.5 point total, as opposed to an under 40 point total out there between the Titans and the Dolphins. So you're going to see that reflected with both the projections and the projected ownership. So if you're playing in the large field contest, it's a really good idea to start there, right? To know where a lot of the other people are going to be stacking and whether to go out there, leverage that, maybe follow that yourself. All that's going to be things that you're going to have to, go through the pros and cons of whether you want to do that. So start off with the quarterbacks, and you'll see that trend starting right off here. Jared Goff, Geno Smith, not only your most expensive quarterbacks, but also the highest owned. So you got Jared Goff at about 26.1% projected ownership. I've got Geno Smith at just under 40% himself, and Tyler Huntley, Will Levis, they don't project nearly as well. One thing I'd say is Tyler Huntley projects a whole lot better than Will Levis, but still sub 20% owned in both players there. And while you might be tempted to want to take some of the lower owned options here, you've still got to get the best lineup out there for Monday Night Football. So personally, in my large field GPP lineups, I'm still going to be trying to stack that second game, as it is by far a better game environment out there for fantasy points, but I'm going to use that first game to try and find some lower owned options. And in fact, if I really wanted to try and leverage against the field, I don't think it's the worst idea to try and start with a Tyler Huntley. So I would say in my single entries, some of my smaller field GPPs, I'm going to be favoring these top two players, but especially down here with Tyler Huntley, I think there is a little bit of upside there out there in the larger field GPPs. You've got Tyreek Hill, you've got playmakers like Jalen Waddle, Devin A-Chain out there on that offense. So it's not even his upside that I like for that Dolphins team. It's more so all the playmakers around him. So they could make Tyler Huntley look a lot more efficient than he historically has, who he hasn't been horrible when he's had spot starts out there for the Baltimore Ravens, but he hadn't done all that much from the fantasy perspective. He's a little bit dependent on trying to get a rushing touchdown. He had a few games where he had 30, 40 rushing yards, but from the passing perspective, leads a lot to be desired. So I would say that he's a sneaky option tonight, certainly not a safe one because of that track record, but with all the weapons around him, does have an avenue for some success. In terms of your running back position, it is stacked up top. In fact, you even got Charbonnet, Pollard down here at number 7, 8 in the pricing that are pretty solid options. Worth noting that Raheem Mostert, really the only injury news that we have on this two-game slate, is not expected to play tonight. So Devin A-Chain has got a fantastic projection because of that. He's the most expensive running back, but because of how soft the pricing is on these two-game slates, you can essentially play whoever the heck you want to at all 8 of your spots. So we'll talk about defenses. They're also super cheap on this kind of slate, where they're all $3,200 or cheaper. So at the running back position, I have no problems going to some of these spend ups. So if I was going to take a player from that first game, you can see that it's a very chalky option there with Devin A-Chain and about 50% owned, but there are spots that you can get different there too, particularly when we get to wide receiver. But Jahmyr Gibbs, one of my favorite plays at the running back position, of course has that rushing upside, but receiving upside as well out there out of the backfield. If you think the Seahawks are going to go out there and roll tonight, maybe you're playing a Geno Smith at the quarterback position, pairing him up with a couple of those Seahawks wide receivers, a good buyback might be a Jahmyr Gibbs, as he would see an increase in usage out there at a negative game script. David Montgomery, if you think the Lions are going to go out there and roll that second game, he would see an increased usage out there in the second half as they run out the clock. Kenneth Walker is apparently back to 100%, so as the day goes on, this projection might go up, and Zach Charbonnet might go down and down when it comes to his projection. So this, of course, right, is my first set of projections earlier in the day. As we get closer to lock, I will be adjusting these for all my Patreon members and all the spreadsheets that they have access to. If you want access to those, you want to see my entire player pool, which of course is not filled out over here on the right quite yet, make sure to check out the link in the description of the video. On there, you can find my Patreon page, and it's just $15 a month will get you access to all of these showdown sheets, as well as what we have for the main slate every single week. In terms of your pure punt plays down here, I think Pollard, he's $6,000. Giants. So I don't want to call him a complete punt play, but I think he's well live, especially as a lower owned option out there in that first game. But you'll see here, right, he's 48% owned. So these running backs, it's stacked, right? A lot of the ownership is here. If you're going to try and get different, it's probably not the best place to do so. But I think there are options like an A-Chain or a Pollard that even in a low scoring game, even if it's only like a 35 to 40 point total over there, as the line would imply, these sort of guys could get there. So while these quarterbacks maybe leave a little bit to be desired, even in my single entry, some of my higher dollar stuff, I'm going to have running backs out there from that first game. Wide receiver is where you're going to win and lose the GPP tonight. I would say in single entries, you're going to be stacking a lot of these top end players, but towards the bottom end of the board here is where you can get your leverage. And just like the last two gamer that we had, these plays, and I'd say everyone from Raymond down to Bobo here, you'd only use in like the biggest of contests out there for tonight. If you're playing into single entries, you're playing in some of the smaller field stuff, single entries, that sort of contest, there is no reason to playing these bottom five options. They are way too expensive. On a showdown slate, they'd normally be like $1,000 to $3,000 on that kind of slate, and now they're that same price tag, but we're no longer in that showdown format, right? They're a lot more expensive than they probably should be. Heck, guys like Barrios might be sub $1,000 out there on Showdown. Traylon Burks, Tim Patrick, Jake Bobo, certainly sub $2,500 on most showdown slates. So your bang for your buck's not going to be there. You can see that with your points per dollar value over here on the second tab. But what you do get is sub 10% ownership on every single player. And it's worth noting, I'm going to point out a few home run hitters. You've got Khalif Raymond. He's a very shifty player. He's not going to see a ton of snaps for the Lions, but if he can take one of the snaps and turn it into a big play, he has upside to get there. Tim Patrick, I like even more than Khalif Raymond. Tim Patrick was picked up from the practice squad from the Broncos. He's coming back from two devastating injuries, so a lot of teams didn't want to take a shot on him, but apparently the reports out of the Lions camp is that he's starting to look a lot better. He's starting to earn more playing time for the Lions, so it's not just coach speak. You're seeing it translate into actual usage. So in terms of the pure punts down here, my favorite in terms of projection and just going out there and using them for tonight is going to be Tim Patrick because of that increase in production. They've got Traylon Burks, plays for a low productive offense, not a very efficient offense over there with the Titans, but at the same time, he does have some big play upside, particularly in the red zone. Jake Bobo, number 4 wide receiver for the Seahawks, he at least plays snaps for them, and same thing with Barrios. He doesn't see a ton of snaps out there for the Dolphins, but if you need to get different in those large field GPPs, this is going to be how you do it, right? I mean, even like a Tyler Boyd at 25%, a DeAndre Hopkins, I've only got like 21% owned. You got Jalen Waddle here at 18%, right? A Tyreek Hill at 20.6%. While I don't love those offenses to go out there and stack them, one of these players could get there, right? As I mentioned for Tyler Huntley, maybe it's Tyreek Hill who's turning some 10, 15-yard catches into 80-yard touchdowns. He does that, right? It's Tyreek Hill. He's the most electric player that we have in the NFL. Jalen Waddle, maybe not that same kind of upside, but he could still take, a large touchdown, a 40, 50-yard touchdown out there and get there that way. These sort of players, I don't like using in team stacks because of the lack of production, but I could see using them as one-offs to get some leverage. So whether it's one of these like 20 to 25 percenters that you can take towards the middle to top end of the board, or one of the sub 5% owned guys down towards the bottom, you're going to have a lot of leverage at the wide receiver spot. In terms of like your core plays, your guys that are higher owned, Amon-Ra makes sense. DK Metcalf in a high total game makes sense, right? They're going to be some of your higher owned players. Jamison Williams at Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's been seeing a lot more targets this year, all projecting pretty solid. Chalky, as you would expect out there. These sort of players, you're using in lineups when you're using stacks, right? If you're starting with a Geno Smith, you're probably using a DK Metcalf, and then a Jackson Smith and Jigba or a Tyler Lockett. You're starting with a Jared Goff tonight, you're probably using Amon-Ra, and then maybe you're using Jamison Williams or one of those cheaper Lions wide receivers down low. That's not that interesting to me, right? Like, you guys know what to do with your quarterback and wide receiver combinations. Going out there trying to find that correlation is going to be especially important on a 2-game slate. When we go over here to the tight end spot, there are some leverage plays you can get towards the bottom, but not a ton of plays that I love here. No one over the 2x points per dollar mark, which is kind of what we're looking for in elite tier plays. Right? Wide receiver position, you have a lot of those 2x options. So the one thing noting for this kind of slate is that I'm not going to have a lot of tight ends at the flex spot. It's just not necessary with the kind of soft pricing that we have on this 2-gamer. So yeah, you're going to have to fill the tight end spot out there in your lineups, but outside of that, I'm not going to have a lot of exposure to this position. If you're looking to get extremely different, I guess Durham Smythe could score a 1-yard touchdown. Has not been playing as much this year. Johnny Smith is only 15% owned, and I think he's live to go out there, potentially find some success. Josh Wiley, he's going to see some snaps, but these are just pure punt plays that you're hoping can score touchdowns. So, like I said, at the tight end position, probably going to play a lot of Sam Laporta. The rest of the field's going to do that too. I'm going to have some Noah Fant mixed in. You can see the field is going to go that direction as well. But if I need to force in differentiation, you've got options here. You've got Chigo Okonkwo, for example, right out there for the Titans. He's their number one tight end. You've got some sub 10, sub 15 percenters here. So running back, quarterback, you're probably not going to find much leverage for tonight. You do have two really good positions to do so, though. And then with your defenses, ownership is relatively spread out. So unless you took a complete flyer out there on the Seahawks defense, you're not going to get any leverage there either. So I would say heading into the slate, have a game plan. Go out there, game script when you're going out there and building your lineups. Tell yourself a story before you're going out there and clicking random names. You think the Lions are going to roll? Make your lineup reflect that. You think the Seahawks are going to roll? Go out there and reflect that. You think for some reason that first game is going to shoot out, then go way over the field out there on that first game. I'll tell you tonight that I think the second game is going to be competitive. It's going to be a lot more high scoring. That's where a lot of my exposure is going to be, but I can't completely ignore the ownership aspect. I'm going to have to try and get different with some of these lower tier options, and personally, that's how I'm approaching the 2-game slate. And now for the prop side of things. So first off, going to start over here on Prize Picks. We've got two props that I really like for tonight. So first prop is going to be this Amon-Ra St. Brown over on receptions. He's at 6.5. He is up at 7.5 on FanDuel. Juice towards the under, so 7 receptions is likely the optimal line here. And on a few books that have him at 6.5, he's in that -120 to -130 range for the over. So if you're somebody that's a plus EV player, you at least have a little bit of line value out there on this number, but more so just because they think it's going to be that high scoring competitive game. Number one wide receivers are going to see a lot of usage. So if this stays competitive, if this isn't going to be a blowout in either direction, I really like this over on Amon-Ra as he's seen a ton of targets over the last few weeks. Week 1 was a little bit sluggish out there for Amon-Ra, was really the one down game that he's had so far, but is trending in the right direction when it comes to his usage. And last year, one of the most consistent players when it came to covering this sort of line. So that's why I like the over there on Amon-Ra, and I paired it up out here with this Kenneth Walker prop, which also needs this to stay competitive. This can't really be a blowout in either direction, unless the Seahawks were to blow out the Lions. That would actually be okay for this kind of slip, but we don't want the Lions to go out there and blow out the Seahawks. So if that doesn't happen, I still love this over out there at 12.5 rushing attempts. And because we're playing the same kind of script for both of these props, right, I'll take that correlation all day, right? It's only a little bit of correlation between these two options, but if we get a competitive or a Seahawks-led game out there, both of these are going to be in a great position to succeed. So I would say that this Kenneth Walker prop, a lot of it has to do with him being healthy. We've heard a lot of quotes from the media in the last day or so that have said that he's ready to go tonight, right? There's no restrictions from everything that we've heard. And as the day has gone on, he's gone from about even money at this 12.5 rushing attempts number to a little bit juiced over. I think he was -120, -130 on books the last time that I checked. So just like the Amon-Ra prop, it's not a ton of plus EV value out there on these options, but a little bit, right? A sprinkle never hurts out there for either of these props. And we do get a slight amount of correlation between the two as well. So that's a 3x payout out there on those two, and something that I already entered myself. Of course, guys, for all the props that I'm taking, all the different slips I'm entering, make sure to check out the Patreon page. Last night, we had a 2x slip on Underdog hit for 10.5x, and it wasn't even like we had multipliers on it. It was two just regular payout props. Because of how shitty the rest of the community did last night, we ended up getting rewarded big time over there in the Underdog Champions modes, which, if you want to get all those slips, right, make sure to check out the Patreon in the description of the video. There's a link down there. You can join it for $15 a month on the prop tier. So just like the DFS side, it's only $15 a month for all the exposure I'm getting to, which is cheaper than almost every other site that you're going to see out there. Again, the best bang for your buck and the best analysis out there on the market. But let's start over here on the Underdog side. So two props that I really like, and if you've seen me talk about this Detroit offense, you know I'm already taking this Jahmyr Gibbs over on touchdowns. I've done it every single week, and to this point, he is either voided or cashed every single time. And if you don't know how the Vulture program works, essentially, if you take like an over on touchdowns, like we have here with Jahmyr Gibbs, and then David Montgomery were to go out there and score, what you're going to get is a refund out there on this kind of prop. Now, in a high total game like this, a close competitive game like we're supposed to have between the Lions and then out there the Seahawks, you're probably going to score anyways with one of those two running backs. But yeah, let's say that David Montgomery, who's -130 or more to score tonight, goes out there and scores, but you're going to get your money back here. And then, of course, you've got Jahmyr Gibbs, who's about even money in books to go out there and score himself. You've got all of that equity as well. So we'll call it very conservative here. We'll say that Jahmyr Gibbs has like a 40% touchdown rate. Montgomery has over a 50% rate, but let's say that he only has like a 45% rate himself. You can quickly see where when you have a 40% hit rate and then nearly a 50% push rate in your back pocket, that this becomes well well into the plus EV. And when you add on top of that this is 1.06 for the multiplier, so you're also getting a higher payout by using them out there in a slip. This is maybe the best prop that you can enter out there for Monday Night Football. So it was the first one that I got to. I've entered it every single week and had no problems to this point. Now, is there potentially going to be a game where neither one of those running backs score? Sure, right? It's not a lock by any means, or I never said that. I never used the 4-letter L word, but at the same time, if they're giving us that protection, I'll play it every single time, right? And to this point, it hasn't failed us, so why jump off the train here, especially in a high total competitive game like we have. And then the other prop we have here is the Zach Charbonnet under on fantasy points, which personally, I project him for closer to 4.5 fantasy points now. If you take a look at his lines, you'll see part of the reason why. He's got, a 21 rushing yard line. He's got a 2 reception line. This is a half PPR site like we have over here on Underdog. So that's 3.15 points right there. You add on his receiving yard line, so add another 1.25 points. That's only like 4.5 points right there, and he's at 7.65 over here in Underdog. Now, you've got to incorporate some of that touchdown equity, but on books, he's over plus 230 to go out there and score tonight. So just like I said, Kenneth Walker getting a little bit of steam towards his overs. People seemingly think that he's going to be fully healthy out there tonight. That is just going to take away usage from a Zach Charbonnet. So even if you're just using the projections on books, you can see that he would project solidly under that kind of number. But when you add on top of that the fact that he's likely seeing less usage tonight because of Kenneth Walker being healthy, that's why I liked it even more. So 4 props that I've already taken over there on the Patreon page. For the rest of the exposure that I'm getting to tonight, you guys know where to find it, right? Check out the Patreon page down below, and let's have ourselves a night. That is all I've got for the Monday Night Football preview. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll include a Thursday Night Football preview dropping either on Tuesday or Wednesday morning, and then we're also going to have our main slate content Monday Night Football for the next week and covered for the rest of the NFL season. So if you enjoyed this, you found it helpful for your process, go ahead, hit that subscribe button as well. Let's go out there and have ourselves a night. Best of luck with all of your exposure, whether it's over there on the DFS side, trying to take down a GPP or two, or over there on the prop side. Hopefully you cash all of your slips, and let's go out there and make this a fun one. For a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page, you guys can also comment down below who you've got as the top scorer on this 2-game slate. Give me a projection as well. Give me where they're going to end up in terms of score. And if you can get that player and their score within 2 points, you'll win a free month of my Patreon page. If multiple people are going to guess the same player and get within 2 points, it'll be whoever gets it the closest. So go ahead, claim your player down below, give me your top score, and best of luck out there in that giveaway. You don't want to wait for the giveaway. You just want to join the Patreon right away. Check out the link in the description of the video. That's all I've got for this preview, guys. I appreciate your support. As I said before, best of luck tonight, and I'll see you guys for the content throughout the rest of the week.